Hi there and welcome back to my channel, and today it's a short one showcasing how a patch bay can transform your pedal board. Now, maybe transform is a strong word, but I think this video might resonate with some of you who've struggled with cable management and general connections on your pedal boards. And I've just gotten the Cinco Cinco by the Gig Rig, which is a 6-input output patch bay that enables you to route your signal or your signal chain in any way that you see fit. On my pedal board at the moment, I'm running the 4-cable method. So not only do I have a cable going from the guitar into the pedal board and the pedal board into the amp, I also have 2 extra cables going into the effects return and effects send, the loop, on the amplifier. And because I'm using the Boss ES8 channel switcher, those effects sends and returns that go to the loop and actually the amp input send are situated halfway down the ES8 switcher. And what that means is I'm having to route those cables around certain pedals that are directly sit above the switching unit. And this is actually a real pain when setting up either for gigs or rehearsals, because you're having to route cables past pedals, which isn't ideal. And it can be really tricky to see which input jacks correspond with which cable. And I'm always conscious of a disconnection happening halfway through a song or a gig because of how the cables are routed on the board. Now, some of you may not have the exact same setup that I do on my board. You might not be using the 4-cable method, but some of you might have situations where the input or the output jacks are really hard to get to because of really tightly packed compact boards. And this is often something that's really hard to avoid when you're building pedal boards. You're having to save space, and sometimes it means routing cables in and around other pedals, which isn't exactly ideal. Now, using the Cinco Cinco, I'll be able to connect those cables that run from the ES8 that would usually go to the effects loop or the amp input. I'll be able to connect them directly to this, which will be mounted on the underside of the pedal board. Now, that will make setting up a lot easier, because instead of having to route cables across the top of the board and in around other pedals, I'll just be able to plug directly into this on the underside of the pedal board. Now, I know most of you will have your own cable preferences, but I'll be using the Boss Pedalboard cables, which are solderless cables, to connect to the patch bay. Reason for this is I've been using these cables to connect all of the pedals into the respective loops into the ES8, and honestly, I've been using these for a few years. They've been extensively road tested and they've never let me down. I know solderless can divide opinion, but they've never broken on me, never disconnected on me. And what I like about them is the cables themselves are quite thin, and the actual jack units are really compact as well, so you can actually get a lot of these in a row without taking up too much space. Now, with these cables too, you get the cutting tool to cut these cables or cut the wire down to the perfect length. So when you're actually making up these cables, you can keep things as compact and as neat and tidy as possible on the underside of your board. So now I'm going to show you exactly how the patch bay is hooked up to my pedal board. And as you can see, from the front of my board is dedicated to the Boss ES8, and at the back of the switcher you can see all of the sends and returns that the different pedals plug into for their respective loops. And I'm going to zoom in here on the 3 outputs that previously would be going directly to the amplifier. So there's the send volume that would go straight to the amp input. There's something called output 1L that would go to the effects return. And there's one under here that you can't even see that's labeled return volume, and this would go to the effects send. And previously, those cables would run over the top of the board in between these pedals and straight out to the amplifier. But now, using the custom cables from Boss, I've cut those down to size and routed them, if I flip this over, directly through the bottom of the board, and I'm not a professional, so please excuse my cable management, but these now are routed down the bottom of the board and straight into the switcher, which I've placed on the side here deliberately, so that when I now set up, I can plug directly into these inputs here. Makes it much, much easier when setting up. So it's not just for kind of cable management, it's not just for making it neater, but it's also much easier to now plug in the side rather than route directly through the top. So to conclude, you might think adding a patch bay is one of those pointless little additions to a pedal board that's just not needed. But in my opinion, it's one of those little upgrades that makes you think, why didn't I do this earlier? It's tidied things up on the board and it's made setting up just that little less arduous. So there you go, there's my take on adding a patch bay to your pedal board. And it's worth noting that this actually has more inputs and outputs than I've shown you today. So actually there's different kinds of connections you can make than just the 4-cable method. You could in theory hook up stereo pedals and stereo effects, or even connect to multiple amps if you're doing a wet-dry rig. And of course there are other patch bays with more inputs and outputs that enable you to have even more flexibility if you wish. So I hope you found this valuable. Please add your comments or questions below if you have any. Please like, subscribe, and until next time, I'll catch you later.